Hi, can you hear me? One second. So my mouse is really slow. Huh? Video off. One second. I'll do it.
Hi, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the launch of Triumph by Monster.com. I'm Vidya, and I take care of talent development for Quess Corp, and I'm going to be your host for the evening. Now, as you are aware, Triumph is an important milestone for Monster.com, as this addresses one of society's most pressing needs, that is to make people feel welcome and included, and to make people feel at home in our corporate world. This event is powered by Monster.com, and as you all are aware, Monster is a leading online and career recruitment resource with cutting-edge technology, providing relevant profiles to employees, relevant jobs to job seekers across the country verticals, experience levels, and geographies. For more than 20 years now, we've been delivering the best recruitment solutions to enhance lives, businesses, and communities around the world. Monster India, now a part of Quess, has over 4 lakh jobs, 75 million job seekers, 40,000 recruiters, and is the leading job portal in India, Southeast Asia, and the Middle East. At Monster, we are truly committed to building a more diverse and inclusive environment for everyone. And in keeping in line with this philosophy, Triumph has been launched in collaboration with a few of the best companies known for diversity and inclusion at the workplace. And of course, we would like to thank our special sponsors for the event, Microsoft, Chubb, and BNY Mellon. Now, let us have a quick look at what Triumph is. Triumph is an important initiative aimed at enhancing diversity and inclusion at workplaces through 3 key events. One is Techno Diva, and I'm sure a few of you already know about this. You've already started participating as well. Techno Diva is a hackathon exclusively meant for women. And this event began on June 29th and will go on till July 18th. So in case you haven't registered for this event and you're interested, please do so. The second one is Connectathon, a virtual career fair hosting over 15,000 jobs from top companies in all India locations. The third one, that is this very event we are all in, is called Conc-live. And this is a platform through which we aim to promote the concept of diversity and inclusion. And we plan to do this through several online sessions, panel discussions, and conversations by eminent industry leaders. Now, Triumph is a virtual platform for candidates to be inspired, compete, and get their dream jobs. And by the end of this event, we hope that we achieve these 3 things. That is, candidates get inspired, candidates compete, and candidates get their dream jobs. Now, through this week, every evening, we have an interesting lineup of events comprising panel discussions, addresses, Q&A sessions with experts from across various fields. And of course, like we launch all of our events at Quess and at Monster, to launch this event, we have Suraj Moraje, Group CEO and Managing Director of Quess, India's largest private employer. Suraj comes with over 2 decades of experience at McKinsey across the globe. He is an alum of IIM Ahmedabad and also a recipient of the Young Alumni Achiever Awards for 2019-20 for corporate leadership. And this award was given by IIM Ahmedabad. Now, Suraj is himself a big believer that diversity and inclusion is a very integral part of any organization. And he personally drives several diversity initiatives at Quess while encouraging all employees and all leadership to follow suit. And we would like to welcome Suraj to this event. Suraj, may we request you to join in and welcome our audience today and share your thoughts and views on this subject. Over to you, Suraj.
Thank you very much, Vidya, and thanks for having me today. Maybe I'd like to start by saying congratulations to the Monster team for pulling this event together. I think that you've truly captured the zeitgeist in that, today, most organizations in the world are tapping into less than 50% of the talent out there because our pools are so heavily skewed towards traditional profiles of males from college-educated backgrounds with specific language skills and specific capabilities. And if you actually look at the broader world out there, the fact is that many of the brightest, most accomplished people in this world have not been to college. 50% of the world's population is women. And so by definition, if you don't have 50% of your organization being women, you're missing out on that pool of talent. And in a country like India, you take LGBTQ plus, you take people who are from deep parts of rural India, you take people who've not had maybe opportunities to be educated because they come from economically backward communities. If we as a society are not reaching deep into those pools, we are not making the most of the talent we have. So I'm very grateful to Monster for setting this up and for making this happen. And I hope that all of you who are participating today enjoy the event and benefit from it. We have a bunch of amazing speakers, and I'm looking forward to my own conversation with Kirthiga in a few minutes. You know, diversity for me was never a personal thing until I moved to South Africa. The organization I was working with in South Africa asked me to lead what was in South Africa known as transformation. For those of you who are familiar with South Africa, you'll know that South Africa had a long and troubled history with racial segregation, a policy known as apartheid. That ended in 1993, after which the government put in place policies to encourage organizations to bring in what they called previously disadvantaged individuals, PDIs, into organizations. And this included people who were defined racially, for example, black or colored, people who were defined on a gender basis, women, people with disabilities, LGBTQ plus, and so on and so forth. The organization I was in had operated in South Africa for about 15 years. And in this time had only been able to promote one black person to being a manager, literally one person. And it is a 100-strong organization. When I was asked to look into this, I went and spoke to some of the young black people in the organization to understand why was it that black people were not getting promoted. If you ask the senior leadership in the office, they would say, look, there's very few people, very few black people have been to the right schools, and therefore, because of apartheid, and therefore the talent pool is smaller, and so the few people who are available are offered huge amounts of money to leave us, and they obviously all go for the higher pay packages. That's the picture that I got when I spoke to the senior people. As I went and spoke to the young black people in the office, though, I got a very different picture. I got a picture of a group of people who felt like they were on the outside because they had grown up in such different backgrounds. There was this one man who a couple of years out actually came out, he was as being gay. But he spoke to me how when he was young, he was always late to his primary school because he grew up in rural South Africa and he had to herd the goats out to a field before he attended class. And this is a man who'd kind of come from that background and been able to work his way into one of the premier organizations in the world. There was this other lady who explained how her mother was a housemaid. And so whenever she would go to a white colleague's house, typically a nice house in South Africa, she would feel out of place because she would grow up in this house. I mean, she grew up in a similar house, but always living in the room at the back, never being part of the main house. And she just felt somehow constricted and out of place. The interesting thing is when I then went and spoke to the young white South Africans, they would also feel completely out of place because they said it's unfair. The black people get more coaching, they get looked after better, and so on and so forth. Every group I spoke to, the Chinese people said, I need a fit here nor there. The Indian people had their own issues. And it dawned on me that actually everybody felt in South Africa that they were just a little bit different. And everybody felt that they were just a little bit oppressed and a little bit marked out. And one of the learnings I took away from that was actually one of in the words of one of South Africa's freedom fighters, a man called Steve Biko, who unfortunately died at the age of 30. But he said that the most potent weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. The most potent weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. And what he meant by that is if you think that somebody's oppressing you, or if you feel like you're an outsider, then you are an outsider. And therefore, the way for you to think about being successful is to say, well, I'm equal to everybody else. There's no reason for me to feel this way. And to make yourself feel like an insider. and to tell yourself you are an insider. And that's more easily said than done in the context of South Africa, that obviously required us as an organization to do things differently. And I'll come to that in a minute. But it also required these young individuals to understand that the fact that they came from different backgrounds actually made them that much more valuable to us as an organization. Because at the end, a team that consists of a bunch of carbon copies of each other who all think, act, and do the same things in the same ways are actually not stronger than the individual. A team is strongest when people from different backgrounds with different learnings, different experiences, and different judgment come together and debate things in the best manner possible. And so for those of you who are from diverse backgrounds, do not feel discouraged because you're from a diverse background. Do not feel discouraged. Understand that that is your strength. That is your source that's your superpower, and use it thus. I think for the organization, the learning was actually a little bit different, because my senior colleague would say, well, we've hired them. It's not like we're racist. I mean, we're absolutely equal opportunity. The reality, though, today is that inclusion today is not about who you choose to keep out. I mean, we're not in a world where we're dealing with racial segregation. Diversity and making diverse people successful is about who you choose to include. So you as a manager, when you want to go to somebody for advice, do you pick the person who's from your university, of your gender, of your sexual preferences, or a person who's exactly like you, or do you pick somebody who's different? Do you choose to pick somebody who's different, knowing that they may not even relate to your question, or they may have a very different view from you, or it might be a little bit more uncomfortable to go and ask them. But do you value the fact that by choosing to include them, you are making yourself better, you're making your organization better, and you're leading to better outcomes? So I think those are some of the two takeaways that I took from South Africa. One, the strongest weapon in the hands of the oppressed is the mind of the oppressor. And two, do you as a manager choose who you include very consciously? With these words, I'd like to wrap up my opening statement today. Thank you all again for being here. Congratulations again to Monster for this phenomenal event. I'm looking forward to it, and I'm sure all the guests are too. Thank you. So I'm back, and I am joined today by an amazing person who I had the pleasure of interacting yesterday while she was making chicken curry. Mm-hmm. I hope your daughter enjoyed that, Kirthiga.
It was fun, thank you.
Kirthiga. So let me quickly introduce you to those who don't know you, and that's probably a very short list of people. Kirthiga is an investment partner at SoftBank Investment Advisors. And she's worked as Facebook India as managing director for over 6 years. In fact, I believe you were their first employee in India, setting them up. Apart from serving on the board of directors for several global companies, including companies like WeWork, Kirthiga also served as the chair of the Stanford Business School Management Board. She's been recognized as Fortune India's most powerful women, and on also Fast Company's list of the most creative people in business, amongst several other recognitions. We're fortunate to have you here, Kirthiga. Thank you for being here.
Yes, very excited to be here. It was really great to hear all of the stories of innovation from the hackathon, and it's such a great event. Congratulations to you and the whole team for this fabulous event.
Thank you. Kirthiga, I'd like to use today's discussion to explore the topic of diversity and what it means to you, and also to your work. And if it's okay, I'd like to start by just getting some reflections on your own personal journey. You were the first employee of Facebook in India, the first woman investing partner at SoftBank Investment Advisors, and you invest in AI, which I think we'll come to that in a bit, is a very male-dominated world from what I can see from the outside. How does it feel to be at the front of a male-dominated world, technology, investing, so on and so forth? And what have been your experiences?
Suraj, one, thanks for setting the stage so beautifully with your stories from South Africa. And as I was listening to your stories, I was remembering a framework that I heard at Stanford where they spoke about diversity, inclusion, equity, belonging, and diversity at this stage, while still hard and while still a goal, and while we're nowhere close to the 50-50 world when it comes to gender parity that we aspire to, it's still in people's consciousness, but that's really step one, right? Like you pointed out, it's about, as they say, being invited to the dance. And then as you traverse equity, inclusion, belonging, it's about, okay, you're invited to the dance, but are you on the dance floor? Are you able to dance how you like without having to dance and conform to the norms that are in the organization? And are you then acknowledged, rewarded, and feel the joy of belonging in that organization? So there is a lot of work that we need to do in each one of these different areas. But coming back to my career and my journey, Suraj, I think the biggest message that I want to share with our audience today is that if I can do all of what you listed, truly this audience, every single one can do all of that and so much more based on their aspirations and what they want to do. Even as I think about the starting point of my career, right, I interacted with a computer for the very first time when I was in my undergrad college. And I didn't own my own computer for several years later. And today, my niece's 2-year-old daughter, she is watching Peppa Pig on a phone that is more powerful than, the computer that I had for many, many years at 2 years old, right? Technology is such an enabling force. What everyone in the audience can get in terms of access to knowledge, access to role models, access to opportunities is transformative. And I really am wishing that everyone uses those opportunities, including the many, many ones that Monster puts in front of them. I think that the need of the day really is about dreaming big, working hard towards your aspirations, believing in yourself, and surrounding yourself with people who almost believe in you more than you believe in yourself. And I think of my journey as being reflective of all of those aspects. Our early role model was Padma Shri Warrior, former CTO of Motorola, now the CEO of Fable. My startup company, the company that I was working for, got acquired by Motorola, and Ed Zander, the CEO, was going to give a keynote at CES in Las Vegas. So the acquisition just happened a few weeks before. A core team, including myself, flew out to Las Vegas to help Ed learn about our technology so that he could, or demo our technology so that he could do it on stage. And I so vividly remember the night before, it was late in the evening, there was Padma Shri Warrior, the CTO, Ed Zander, and they were just having a fun, informal conversation. And sitting there in the background, I was like, oh my God, this person, the CTO of Motorola, is another human being. It is another person. And that minute was a minute that I felt, I can aspire to the kind of roles that she has aspired to. So I certainly hope the audience takes inspirations from the many incredible women that you have on stage today at this event and use the learnings, the insights to take steps towards their career, Suraj. Of course, be aware of the biases that exist in the workplace. You touched upon them. There's a ton of research there. And for me, that research almost helps me neutralize the situation and make me feel, oh, it's not me. It's systemic biases that I need to be aware of. I love your quote too. Every time that I've been aware of those biases, found the tools to tackle that, the other side has actually been grateful and said, oh, most of the times it has been unconscious. And I feel very blessed to be in organizations that are very aware of these unconscious biases and actively encourage both sides to really think about them and tackle with them. So for the audience, dream big. There is no goal that you cannot aspire to that anyone else aspires to, Suraj.
Wow. Dream big, dream big and dance.
Totally. How you want to.
How you want to. You spoke about being lucky to be in organizations that that are trying to become aware of unconscious biases. Are there still challenges you face in these organizations? And being a person who's now helming such organizations, what are you doing, or what can you do to take forward the cause of diversity?
That is a great question. And people often ask me that. They said, hey, does it get easier as you get more senior? And my answer is not an answer that I'm sure everyone wants to hear. I'm sure everyone wants to hear that it all goes away. But to me, it's like going to the gym, right? It never gets easier. You just get stronger. And the challenges that you deal with are that much more complex. So all of the biases that we spoke about, affinity bias, likability biases, or that we know about, they exist at all levels across all careers. And it is something to work towards addressing as we create this 50-50 world. What are we doing? At SoftBank Investment Advisors, SoftBank Investment Advisors is a manager of the over 100 billion SoftBank Vision Fund, one of the largest tech funds in the world, and we take that responsibility very seriously. It started with our CHRO, Catherine Lenson, establishing a diversity council a few years ago, where we also set goals around things like what should be the increasing the gender representation. And it was part of that focus when I joined SoftBank. And it was interesting, by the way, Suraj, when I joined, I had a lot of very trusted well-wishers telling me, really, you want to join an organization where you're going to be the first investment partner? Do they really have an environment and a culture that will value that, where you can thrive in? Perhaps you should think twice. And for me, that was a bit counter, right? If every person who thinks that way, there will never be a first female investment partner. And for me, it was a challenge and an opportunity. And I found the organization to be very hungry, very willing to embrace initiatives and thought processes that create that culture of people with diversity to thrive. So we looked at it from three different aspects. One, we looked at what is it that we need to do internally. We created, fostered affinity groups for women, LGBTQ, the African American Hispanic community, and have executive sponsors for each one of them. We took that thinking to the ecosystem. We have initiatives like Connect and Lead, which bring together rising women leaders from our portfolio companies. And finally, we have a lot of focus into dollars going into diverse-led founders. And a recent initiative that we started last year is a program called Emerge. It's an accelerator program for brilliant companies by underrepresented founder. And Suraj, to your definition, diversity was pretty large, right? It was first-gen college educated, LGBTQ, gender, minority, underrepresented minorities, the veteran community, any community that doesn't have that same foundation, same playing field was what we thought about. And we have just launched the accelerator program in the UK. Applications are open until the 7th. So if anyone here is eligible, wants to apply, there is an Emerge Accelerator program. So these are just a few. And I would say these are starting steps, and we all need to take bigger strides, Suraj.
No, I can imagine, but it's quite inspiring, the broad range of activities that you undertake. And I would like to probe into maybe just one angle. I can imagine that at more junior levels, being a banker means a lot of late night hours. There's probably a fair amount of cultivating clients over dinners and maybe kind of being out late. Is that a world that's easy for a woman to adjust to? And if so, or what could women do to kind of be more comfortable in some of those roles, if not?
Suraj, great question. And I think back to my experience at Facebook India, in addition to my experience here. Facebook India, being managing director of Facebook India, is a 24/7 role, if you may. But the way I personally think about it is that as I'm having this conversation with you, I am a full-time mom, a full-time wife, a full-time daughter, a full-time friend, and a full-time employee, right? When I'm at work, it's not that I'm suddenly not a mom, a wife, or a daughter. I think a lot about, all right, how is it that I blend and integrate? Seems to be the word of the day on how you integrate your work and your life, and working out patterns that work best for you in such demanding roles where you are, there could be an emergency any one point of time when it comes to Facebook India. If you're working on a transaction, it is the hours that it takes. The beauty of those roles are twofold. One, they understand that you need flexibility in other ways. So if I've had a parents-teachers meeting, if my children were sick, there was never any hesitance required to say, I need to go, and my colleagues would be the family that step up to take care of my work. And similarly, earlier there was this notion of, keep your work and your life separate. If you're having challenges at work, leave them at work, don't bring them home. And of course, there needs to be separation. But I talk a lot about what's going on in my work with my family. My family knows when I have a particularly intense time coming up, and then they are fluid enough to accommodate that. And so that I still remember several times when I'm putting my girls to bed and I've told them there's something going on, I have to go back to work. Our usual bedtime routine would be they would make up the name of a title of a story, and I would make up a story. That was our bedtime routine. And the story would always have two girls, and it would always have a moral of the story. But as I shared these stories, very often I would start falling asleep even before they started falling asleep. And I would remember my little ones nudging me saying, Mom, you told me that you have to go back and get some work. So please don't fall asleep. Please go back and do your work if you have to. So that's how I have approached work and life, Suraj. And I have found that it works. And I actually think I will share something that I truly believe in, which is a superpower that I'd like the audience to have, which is a superpower called the and. It's the power of the and versus the tyranny of the or. There are many times in life where things are presented as choices. You have to do this or that. And while certainly you can't do everything at one time, I have found that more often than not, if you try to think outside the box, there is a way to get both. And maybe I'll give you one example. I had someone at Facebook come up to me and said, I really want to do my MBA. I also want to have a child. I feel that time is passing by for both these things. Which one, how should I think about this choice of doing an MBA and having a child? And I said, wait a minute, why can't you do both? I had my first child when I was a year into business school, and I personally think it was the best time to have a child. She had 365 aunts and uncles. I partied even more after she was born because she was up anyways. So I would go with her and we would have a great time and come back. So the power of the and versus the tyranny of the or is a principle that I have used for the question that you asked, Suraj.
That's fantastic. What have been are there any, like when you coach younger women today in your organizations, what are the 2 or 3 examples you can give of places where typically they think it's an or, and you're able to help them figure out it's an and? I love the one about childbirth, by the way, because I remember one of my colleagues once telling a woman who came and said that she was pregnant, oh, this is a terrible time in your career to have a child. And I told him there's never a good time in your career to have a child, right? I don't think there's a good time or a bad time. You have it when you have it. I can imagine that is one of those examples. But what are some of the other examples that you think where an or can be converted to an and?
Totally. What you just mentioned, that example is a beautiful example. I also personally went through a phase where we wanted to have children, but it was never the right time. There was something else going on. And one day it dawned on me that if this is something that we really want, if it is never the right time, the converse rule applies, is that it's always the right time. So if you're ready, go prepare for it as much as you can, and then nature conspires to support you in what you want to do. And on that point, I also want to highlight a super important point about how organizations and companies view maternity. I remember interviewing Archana Vadala, a head of staffing for Facebook India, and she was with another large internet company. She was expecting at the time she was interviewing with us. And I remember discussions about, we're going to be in an intense hiring period. Can we really afford having someone who's gone for maternity leave for a long period of time? And it was a good question to ask, but my immediate answer was, this is someone who is such a game changer, and a 6-month maternity or whatever maternity time they want will be a blip in the long-term trajectory that they have. And sure enough, we were so grateful that she took a bet on us and she joined us when she could have easily said, this is not a time to change things. Mm-hmm. She took a bet on us. In those few months before she went on maternity, she had whipped things in place, put in things a system to seamlessly carry on when she was gone. She's still with the firm, runs staffing for APAC, and I'm so glad that we made that decision. So it's really important. And I've been in endless such conversations about women coming back from break and other such situations. We need champions within the organizations. We need policies, processes to support that kind of transition back. Other and scenarios, volunteering. I used to volunteer every Thursday at Lucille Packard Children's Hospital before my second child was born. And when Arya was born, it was just too difficult. 2 children falling sick at different times. I could not commit to a regular schedule. And it was something that I started missing in my life. Community has always been a core part of my life. As I was talking about this to one of my colleagues, she introduced me to an organization called Hands on Bay Area that lets you sign up for snacks of volunteering. So they work with hundreds of organizations. They list their volunteer opportunities. You can sign up on the go. And there are opportunities where you can take your kids with you as well. So that's what I started doing. It was perfect. So my kids, ever since Arya was probably 3 months old, have come with me for English as a second language tutoring, planting native plants in Stanford campus, in the soup kitchen, and more. That's just life as they know it. And I think it has done them a world of good. I take that to philosophy to my work as well. And there are several times at work that I've been presented with, we can do this or this. And I push on that and say, what if we want to do both? How can we make that happen? Hopefully that helps trigger some thoughts. My message here, by the way, is not for people to make the same choices that I do. When Arya was born, second child, I wanted to nurse her for the full year, just like I did for my first child, but I needed to travel. And I remember many sleepless nights thinking, oh my God, is this the moment that people talk about where one has to, at some point, make choices between personal goals and professional goals? And it struck me at one point that says, I don't have to. So for the first year, I actually traveled with her. And every place that I went, something happened to help with care, whether it was a colleague saying, she can go to my child's daycare, and I would nurse, do my meetings, and it all worked out. Again, message is not make the same choices as I do today. By the way, the world has evolved more. Companies have more policies, processes, support for these situations. And if you don't, think more about it. But think more about the different things that you want to do. And I promise you, you can probably fit in more than what you think you can at this point of time.
That's inspiring. That's inspiring.
What about it? What struck you?
Well, I think it's inspiring that you find ways to make things work, and I think it's inspiring that your kids send you back to the office. You're trying to get- No, but I think that it is not easy to juggle all these things. I mean, I think that each of us in the corporate world is constantly juggling so many things. I genuinely think that when my kids were younger, they just didn't want me, and they wanted their mother, and I think it was that much more difficult for my wife in that period. So.
But Suraj, actually, I have to share a story. I recently, as my kids are teenagers, I asked them, I said, tell me the truth. Like, did you resent the fact that I was just not around a lot of time? And two things from that conversation, right? Because they're now, older one is 18, younger one is 16 yesterday. And they said, Mom, used to go travel to the United States and used to come back and get candy for us. So we were very popular kids in school because we used to get all this candy. And so we were fine. Right? Don't overthink this. And by the way, again, I actually firmly believe there is no substitute for people talk about quality time. Yes, there is quality time. Be present when you are with your family, your kids, your friends. And this is something, again, that I've had to learn over time. But there is also value to quantity of time. Parenting does not happen when you decide to show up. So really, again, there is no substitute. And I made the personal choice, Suraj, that, again, my choice, everybody has to make their choice, that I would work very, very hard when my children were young and in protected environments. I was dropping them to a daycare, or I was dropping them to the friend's house. I knew who they were interacting with. And then as they needed more of my time, more at an intellectual, emotional level versus more of the physical needs initially, that I would want to be at a place that I have more flexibility, and at a stage in my career that I have more flexibility. After Facebook, I actually took a 3-month all life, no work break and spent time with my family in ways that I had never before. We did many memorable things. I went with my older child to the Everest Base Camp. It was my second time doing this. So it doesn't have to be all at once. Balance.
I guess you have to know your priorities. But we've spoken about your children. What of the in-laws? What of the parents? And what of the husband? What role do they play in the life of a woman leader?
As you were asking me about how I juggle, the picture in my mind is of all of those important constituents and stakeholders in my life. As you think about different life stages, this audience thinks about different life stages. 3 messages. 1, if you are single, thinking about your partner, know that the partner that you choose will be the most important career decision that you will make. Okay, men or women, by the way, this applies to everybody. The career that the partner that you choose will be your most important career decision. Not your first job, not the industry, not your first manager, your partner. I wouldn't be here having this conversation if not for a wonderfully supportive husband who has been more than the 50-50 parent for our kids. To the earlier question that you were asking, we have had to learn what each parent would do, and we both work on parenting in ways that aligns with each of our strengths, and ones in ways that gives joy. And the same applies to parents, and the same applies to mother-in-laws. I remember Zia Modi saying, if your mother-in-law needs to be your best friend, if my husband is sick, I can still go to work. If my mother-in-law is sick, I cannot go to work, was again Zia Modi's message. But I feel grateful for the support from my parents, from my in-laws. I will again reiterate that it is so important for companies and societies to help support this equation. And two examples, I heard of a company that actually invited the mother-in-laws to the workplace on International Women's Day and showcased the work that the amazing women in the organization were doing. And that evening, when the woman went back to work, the mother-in-law said, "Oh my God, you are doing such amazing work, such important work. You should sit down and relax while I or your husband gets you a cup of tea or coffee." So what are the companies doing to incorporate that? What is society doing? I remember in Mumbai, the WhatsApp group at school was a mom's WhatsApp group. It wasn't a parent's WhatsApp group. I had to make a case to say, it doesn't work. In my family, if both of us are not on this group, my child will be stranded one day and not get some notification that one of us should get. So think about equal parenting opportunity. What are companies doing for paternity benefits? I remember companies like Flipkart during my time at Facebook India introducing paternity for the first time. And I know it is getting to be more and more the norm there. There is a lot that we need to do at an individual level, at a societal level, and a corporate level, Suraj.
No, I think that's right. I think that's right. I also think that, at least the question is work from home has made it more difficult for a lot of women as opposed to easier. Because I think that working from the office, at least my perception, I'd love to get your views. My perception is that when you work from the office, at least you were cocooned in the office away from home and there was no chance anybody called on your time, versus somehow in the Indian context where cooking, cleaning, everything seems to fall on the woman. When she's at home, I just find it's a lot more difficult for some of my women colleagues to balance life. Are you observing the same, and what are some of the tricks that you think could be used to cope with this?
Suraj, COVID and the pandemic has set things back for gender parity by decades. We are hearing of updates that can push things out by several decades. There are numbers like 4.5 times more women stepped out of the workforce than men. And there's a whole conversation about not recession, but secession, where there are women who have had to step back. And there is a lot that needs to be done. And for all of the reasons that you mentioned, when there is starting from, literally every segment of the population. I'm on the board of WeWork, and we were looking at stats of how even in the United States, only 30% of the workforce is in a position to be able to work from home. So while there are certainly all of the advantages of no commute, etc., we have to recognize that not everybody has the capability of being able to work from home. Right. Yeah. And of course, the numbers are more accentuated around race, ethnicity, gender lines. So there are things like that we really need to keep in mind. And even in my home, for some reason, the kids will feel very comfortable just feeling that they can walk into the door or give me a call because mom is home during the day. So there have been many, many flexibilities that the pandemic has provided by the work from home, but equally it has exacerbated a lot of challenges. And we are all going to have to make concentrated efforts to try to reverse some of those step backs that we have taken in this matter.
I think you're right. I'd like to move on, maybe, Kirthiga, just changing gears from maybe sort of diversity in the organization and in how we transform our organizations, to diversity in what you do, which is AI, ML. And I think artificial intelligence has changed the landscape of education, medicine, learning, what have you, driving, finding criminals, spotting spotting miscreants. And yet, one hears increasingly of stories where AI itself is imbued with the same biases that us as human beings are. So how do we handle that? And many of the people watching today are from the technology space. Probably many know how to code a neural network. How do we think about getting these biases out? And what are some of the biases you see?
I want the audience to know that you are so needed in the workforce because of this exact question that Suraj asked, and for so much more, because we do have a diversity crisis when it comes to AI at the moment. We know, as you said, Suraj, that biases seep into systems unconsciously. And if we have to design systems that are human-centered, innovative, ethical, the people designing them, building them, need to represent the population, which today it is not. If you look at university research, professors in AI, it is very skewed male-female. 80% comes on from the male side. If you look at the workforce in some of the largest organizations like Facebook, like Google, you're talking about 15% of AI engineers at Facebook being female, 10% at Google. And we need those numbers to change. So for everyone on this call in technology, in AI, you are so needed in the workforce because you are going to help design better products, better services that will serve community, society, the world. I also, Suraj, I'm a huge believer in how technology can be used to address these biases, these discrepancies. And the more everyone in this audience can be thinking about that, the more we will be able to move in the right directions. A few examples. One of my most favorite example of the use of AI at Facebook was when they rolled out a version of their product for the visually impaired. And I know this conference is for PWD, LGBTQ, as well as for women. What the product did was, with the help of a screen reader, you could scroll through newsfeed and it would say, it would verbalize, it would look at a post and say, I see Suraj, Kirthiga having a conversation, okay? And it is sunny or smiling. So it's a game changer for the visually impaired in terms of how they can now connect with their near and dear. There is so much more that needs to be done. I know Microsoft is one of the sponsors, how they are thinking about how to use technology for the differentially able is really phenomenal. Other examples, SoftBank recently invested in a company called Eightfold.ai. What they do, it's an AI first company. They build up a more holistic picture of your resume beyond what you have listed. And it's not just a attribute matching, but it's more of understanding based on your skills, etc. And what they do is specifically have capabilities that factor DEI. You can have blinded resumes. There are stats that show that if you have two resumes, one from a white male versus from underrepresented minority community, the same resume, there are 50% more chances that the white male will get called versus, this is research done by Lean, and I'm sure in conjunction with your former organization, McKinsey. So how do we neutralize some of those? How can we have blinded resumes? What it also does is it will allow you to go to a job website, upload your resume if they're a client of Eightfold.ai, and it will surface for the person applying the roles that are most relevant for you based on your resume. What does that do? There's research that shows that women look at a role and feel that they have to match 100% of the criteria to apply. And I'm sure if we saw the audience, they would be nodding. Whereas men look at a role and say that if there's 60% match, they think it's a great fit. And that's, again, just research and how people think. So what this does, it surfaces role that the community, like a woman, might never have thought of applying for. And now she's looking at this and saying, really, I'm a perfect match for this. Let me go ahead and apply. Some of their companies are saying that they've seen a 50% increase in diverse candidates because of this kind of matching. So how can all of us think more and more about how to use technology, how to use AI to tackle the very biases that society really needs us to tackle in so many different ways, Suraj?
That is phenomenal. That is phenomenal. You're also on the board of well, you're the chair of the board of the Stanford Business School.
Yeah.
How did diversity come to play there? Because obviously you spoke about selection, and I'm sure that even there, it must be so difficult to get such talented kids applying. There must be bias coming into play there. How do you de-bias it? How was that experience for you?
So this is a huge topic of focus across educational institutions, and at Stanford Business School, that was no exceptions. It was Dean John Level's, one of his top 5 priorities was around DI. I remember in one of the board sessions that we had focused on this topic, Dean John sharing that today, as he looks around the class, he feels like he's addressing the UN because of the kind of diversity that he sees in the classroom, and that wouldn't have been the case, a few decades ago. So I feel that there are strides made there. There's a lot of thinking going into reviewing the content. It's fascinating how, as you look at the case studies, the language being used around women protagonist versus male protagonist is very different, and language conveys meaning, right? So so they're doing a sweep of that to make sure that both are being portrayed in a similar manner and in a way that is appropriate. While the diversity stats have gone through a dramatic change towards the positive, Suraj, one of the things that we spent a lot of time thinking about was the inclusion aspect that you opened this talk with. Because as you now have different constituents, it now brings about new challenges about how do we make sure they feel included. If you're a first-gen college-educated student who's doing the MBA, what's the community? What's the support system? What happens when you have people from a country where LGBTQ has a religious conflict? What happens if you're a person from that country and your religion has a conflict with your identity? Those are all aspects that are aspects that are real, and the biggest way that I think both in the corporate world as well as in the university world to support that is, one, to make sure, we acknowledge and understand that there are these questions and the ways to support. To make sure you foster a discussion around that, because there were people who said, I'm so afraid to even have this conversation because I might offend someone. How do we create safe zones to have those conversations? I personally am learning, every single day, I learn new nuances. And I think this is something that, Suraj, even decades later, we're going to have to continue to be in that learning mode so that hopefully we learn quickly. We don't make the same mistakes or challenges of yesterday, but there will be new challenges that we're faced with that we're going to have to continue to learn to provide the kind of environment that you and I are talking about.
That's a good point. I think dialogue is just indispensable, isn't it? As we come into each other's faces with our own values and beliefs. I find it's such a difficult balance to strike. Also, if I look at just the technology space, the global technology space itself, you've got Twitter getting into trouble both at home in the US and in places like India for completely opposite reasons. In one place, it's just depending on what it's choosing to kind of pick as its values are getting it in trouble for opposite reasons. Or you have Google in China acting in a different way from the US. And I guess the question of what is the irreducible core of our values, and what do we change to suit the environment around us and to be more inclusive in a sense. I think that's a very difficult balance to strike, isn't it?
It is. And dialogue, both sides. I think I'll go back to the beautiful quote that you started with about the minds of the oppressed and the oppressor. So having that dialogue, making sure we're cultivating environments where people feel that sense of ownership, that they belong, that they can have that conversation, and then being willing to act. It's one thing is about words, but willing to act and put into places the changes, the processes, the systems needed for such diversity to thrive is so important.
Absolutely. Kirthiga, we're out of time. This could have gone on for hours more, but let me close with one question, which is a nod to your currently Japanese parented organization. How do you define your ikigai?
Ikigai, what drives my happiness, my joy, my content. At the core, it is the sentiment of wanting to leave the world, a slightly better place than it was in whatever way capacity I can. Suraj, my mother did not finish her high school education because her parents thought that she knew enough math to do the grocery bill and the laundry bill. So surely, why should a girl need to study any further? I'm so grateful that that's not how they thought about education for their two daughters. To me, it gives me a huge sense of optimism about the kind of change that one generation can bring, and also a huge sense of responsibility about what we need to do to leave the world that much better for the next generation. So that is at the core. And by the way, one framework that I want to give this audience as I think about that is I always think I have this visual of someone who's walking, and there are people in front, there are people besides, and there are people behind. From the people in front, seek inspiration. From the people beside, seek companionship. From people behind, think about lending them a helping hand. The beauty of this picture is that it applies no matter what a person is doing, what stage of their career they are in. So I'd love for everyone to think about who can they seek inspiration from, who's their companion, and who is it that they can help and lend a helping hand. So think about that. At the core are people. People drive me. They are my source of joy. They are my source of energy. My husband, my children, my mom, my family, my friends, my colleagues, who very rapidly, friends becoming family, colleagues become family. That is at the core. I also just get inspiration from my running and my fitness. So going to bed every day, content and able to sleep well at night is an important core philosophy in life, Suraj.
Fantastic. No, thank you very much for the time. I certainly learned a lot about surrounding yourself with people who believe in you, about the power of the and versus the tyranny of the or. And also, I think you're right. It never gets easier, but you get stronger. And that's just a wonderful metaphor. So thank you very much for the time again. Thank you for waking up and being here at 5 o'clock in the morning, your time. We're all better off for it. So really appreciate it.
Well, no, it's great to be here. And I'm cheering for everyone in the audience. And I'm wishing that they soar high, they soar with purpose, with talent, with skill, and with empathy. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Suraj, and thank you, Kirthiga, for joining us today. And Kirthiga, I must tell you that one of the key messages that I really, really loved is where you said that the partner that you choose is your most important career decision that you make. And I think this holds good for a lot of us, especially those of us who I think are, married, and it so really doesn't mean it's the partner or your spouse, I think this is a big, important decision. Thank you for joining us, and we hope to have more such conversations with you, Kirthiga. Right, so we're moving on to the next section of the event. And today we have with us Suparna Mitra, who joins us from Titan. And Suparna is going to talk to us about, and Suparna is the keynote speaker, and Suparna will address us on the topic of nurturing ambitions.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, should I start?
Hi, yes, Suparna, you're on. But before we get started, we'd like to introduce you to the audience, please.
Sure.
So for everyone, we have Suparna. Suparna is the CEO of CEO of Titan, of the watches and wearable division. And Suparna comes with extensive business experience, mainly in the lifestyle and retail marketing area. Suparna joined Titan, where she worked on several roles in marketing, both in international and domestic sectors. And the next stint that Suparna was with Talisma Corp as a director of product marketing. And after a few stints, Suparna rejoined Titan and became the global marketing head of Titan, where she was responsible for marketing in India and international markets. Following this, she has taken up the role of regional business head for the South, for the whole of Titan, where she had the accountability of all businesses of Titan South region, and these businesses included watches, jewelry, and eyewear for Titan. Suparna's last assignment was as the Chief of Sales and Marketing Officer for the Watches and Wearables Division. And she currently serves on the board of governors for IIM Kozhikode and has previously served on the board of Tata Power Solar. And Suparna, thank you for joining us today and taking time out to address our audience on the topic of nurturing ambitions. Over to you, Suparna.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot. Very good evening to all who are in the audience. It's my privilege to speak to all of you. It's always great to address a lot of people. I'm told that it's a mixed audience. There are a lot of women, but there are also some men. The topic that I chose, and it came to me on that day, was about ambition. And the word ambition carries very different meanings depending on the gender that you have. And that has always struck me as something very interesting on how your gender actually colors your idea of ambition. And I thought I'll pick up this and, I have a short presentation. The presentation has got just a few, I would say, starting points, and I will share some of my stories and some of my perspectives on ambition. So, sorry. Can you all see my screen? Can someone confirm that you can see my screen?
Yes, Suparna, we can see your screen.
Thank you. Yeah. So I was thinking about, and I'm a great admirer of Priyanka Chopra. Look at the guts of this woman. She was a celebrity, and to start with, she was a beauty queen, and there are a lot of prejudices about how beauty queens are not really, don't have substance. And look how she made it in the world of Indian cinema. And then she went abroad and she's made a distinct career, a very distinct identity for herself. And this is a quote that she said, and I totally resonate with it. Ambition is a word associated with women negatively. People say she's too ambitious. Why is that a bad thing? And I think certainly in the Indian sociocultural milieu, ambition and women, these two words, when they get together, often sounds like there are layers and layers of meaning, and not all of them are positive. And today I thought I will use this opportunity to decode and to really make ambition something which is positive, which is inspiring, which is aspirational, which all people, including all women, young women, should definitely see in a positive light. So why is this? Why is it that ambitions, which seems to be, almost like a human right, like everybody has ambition, everybody has the right to ambition. It's a prerogative. If you are a human being and you are born with certain unique skills and talents and education, shouldn't you be aspiring for a better life, a better position? Isn't that part of human progress? So, firstly, for women and for young women to embrace that ambition is your right is a big step. That it's not just okay to be ambitious, but in fact, you are giving away your human right if you think being ambitious, there is a problem with being ambitious. So, why is it that in our education system, in our socio-cultural system, ambition and women become a problem? So, let's peel this onion. One of the ways in which a lot of people, a lot of women and men, kind of make sense out of ambition is by actually flipping it and saying ambition is not just your right, ambition is your responsibility. And this is where I was saying, your unique skills and talents, your unique perspective, who you are, the fact that you're born means that there is a purpose, and that responsibility will only be fulfilled through your working towards your ambitions and fulfilling these ambitions. And ambitious people are the ones who are changing the world for the better. So, this is an important construct in our heads that ambition is your right. But, a lot of people, both men and women, because we are all conditioned by the same sociocultural influences, we think of it as being somewhat selfish. And therefore, if you flip it in your head saying, not only is it my right, but it is my responsibility, I think it is easier for us to be walking on that path of ambition. And I heard what Kirthiga said right towards the end, that, what we are doing, what ambitious women, successful women are doing, it's not just for themselves. Yeah, sure, they're doing it for themselves, they're doing it for their families. But, importantly, they're doing it for an entire generation. And once women are, the ambition and the successes of women are normalized and they're accepted and they are even celebrated, is when the next generation of women would feel it completely normal to, and maybe in 10 or 15 years time, maybe nobody needs to have this kind of presentation, because certainly in our generation, and I started work almost 29 years back, ambition and ambitious women was always a bit of a problem. I recall in my very early days, I had a very, like a super boss who told me, you've done your MBA and I know you're working very hard, but really, very soon you will get married and you will have children and then you will not be able to do this. And so I wonder, and I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, why would you tell that to me? Did you tell that to my male counterpart who just came in before me? And sometimes a large part of moving forward with your ambition is to unhear a lot of people who are telling you that ambition in women is not a good thing. So just unhear it, just move forward with whatever you think is, your rightful place. So this is the point about, it's a lovely quote. I really like this because it kind of gives perspective to how the very idea of rising in the world and the ambition to do so, it's the very salt of the earth. It's the parent of all enterprise and the cause of all improvement. So whenever you're guilt tripped by somebody, maybe family, maybe peers, maybe bosses, maybe your inner voice, because sometimes the inner voice is the collective voice of our mothers and grandmothers and many other people who've told us many things. Just remember that to rise to your level and to really, go after what you believe in is something that is both your right and your responsibility. So moving forward, how do we overcome this guilt of ambition? And it was very interesting for me because when I was putting this deck together, I was, going back and forth of all the, like I said, self-talk that holds me back from time to time, and also the positive self-talk that I tell myself in order to move forward. And I think it was the first time in my life I actually put it down and possibly discussing this with a lot of people on how do we overcome the guilt of ambition. And really speaking, why should there be guilt? It's a separate thing. But I think large numbers of people, large numbers of men also, but certainly large numbers of women have this point about the guilt of ambition. And here's the thing about how women are the largest untapped reservoir of talent in the world. And if at any point you feel that your professional ambition is a somewhat selfish thing to do, think about the fact that you can actually do things to improve the world. You can actually display your talent, perform, and earn money, make a good success in your career, and enjoy whatever you have learned, whatever you have earned, and unlock. The word untapped, to me, it was untapped reservoir. To me, it sounded like unlocked potential. So the key to unlocking that potential is actually with us. And the unlocking first has to happen in the mind before it happens in the physical world. The other way of actually working around ambition, because this is the standard thing you get asked in interviews, where do you see 5 years from now? And in your head you're thinking, I can't even see 5 months from now. Who knows? What are you even talking about? And you end up giving some kind of fake reply because that's what people say. But this goes back to vision and your own very own personal vision statement. And the whole Japanese concept of ikigai is very much part of this. That honestly, at some level, please understand, nobody else is interested in you and your career as much as you are. So you have to hold that responsibility and outline that vision. So the vision, I'm not necessarily saying is I need to be so and so designation and team lead and this and that. No. I think it's about what kind of professional do I want to be? What kind of person do I want to be? What is my area of expertise? How do I become my own champion? So if, in the classic Ikigai framework, what you are good at, what you love doing, what the world needs, and what you can get paid for. And where all of this overlaps is your own personal vision. Sometimes words themselves throw us, right? So because the word ambition is seen as being hard and selfish, maybe you can break through this challenge by using the word vision. I have done it at some point. The vision also doesn't necessarily need to be very narrow about just professional achievements and just about work. The vision can be about the wholesome person that you want to become. You want to become, you want to have a family, you want to have friends, you want to have passions, you want to contribute to the community. All of that, you want to look after your parents, whatever it is, that wholesome, completely integrated personality that you want to become in 5 years, in 10 years, in 15 years. That's the vision. You know, one of these Insta reels of some meme somewhere, I found a quote which I thought was very interesting, because they said, the quote really went that if you can, if whatever you are doing now, whatever you want to become, if as a 7-year-old, when you were 7-year-old and you thought of you now, if you were proud of this, as well as when you will be 70 years old, if you can be proud of who you are, then that's a very good place to be. And that is a vision. It's not a unidimensional ambition. So sometimes ambition is part of the larger, grander plan of your life vision. And that is a good way, that's a good context in which you can plant the seeds of your professional ambition. This was another one. And of course, Kamala Harris broken, one of the last big glass ceilings, which is, was there for the longest time. And her quote is, dream with ambition, lead with conviction, and see yourselves in a way that others may not simply have done because they've never seen it before. This is a very, very important thing. And I'll just, narrate a small personal anecdote. In the introduction, it was said that I'm on the board of governors of IIM Code. And I remember, actually, the first time I went there, I went as a speaker, and I was having some discussions with the director, and then I was what I would call the professional speaker, and there was a guest speaker, a celebrity speaker, and that person was a film actor actually. There was like a lobby, like a room in which all speakers were coming and sitting. These were in the good old, in-person days, not in an online setting. And so he was sitting there. And I think I should share his name because he does a lot of work for leadership development and all that. A person called Ashish Vidyarthi, who's a very consummate and very accomplished actor, but has a very, he's doing a second innings working with companies, etc. So, he was introduced, I was introduced in something, CEO, and then there was this whole conversation about, he didn't say this, but the context was that I don't look like a CEO. And that is because people haven't seen women CEOs in a sari and a bindi. And once you start seeing it, then it becomes normalized. The second time a CEO turns up in a sari and a bindi, I don't think people will think so much about it. It's the first time that people think a lot about, all the CEOs we've seen so far are men and they're wearing, I don't know, suits or ties or whatever it is. And they look, so, this point about, are you looking the part? Maybe you are, maybe you don't, but it doesn't matter as long as you can see yourself that way. If you can, then others will. If you are kind of losing the plot right there, then surely others will not be able to see it. So I think this is an important thing, and it's not so much about the CEO thing. It's about anything. If you see yourself in a way that others may not, because they have never seen it before, and you're able to climb that mountain in your head, then the sky is the limit. Having said that, ambition needs things. It's not just about having a grand plan and seeing yourself in a certain way. Those are very important. And as I said, it's a mind game. And so first you have to set yourself up in the mind, in your mind, and later in other people's minds. But it also needs other legs. And one of the big legs, perseverance. It is important that I have not chosen the word hard work. I am telling you, anybody who's earning a living in these days is working hard. I cannot imagine people who are not working hard. Everybody's working like crazy. And, with COVID, with lockdown, women have taken on so much. It's just, it's at some crazy level of responsibility that they're at home doing their work, the professional work, managing home, managing kids, education of kids, leisure, keeping everyone sane. It's a lot of work. But perseverance has a tinge of tenacity. It has a trace of doggedness. It has that never give up quality. And I find that that is something which really is very important, because we all know about the leaky pipeline, the number of women who enter the workforce, to how many who come into the middle management, to how many actually reach the top. That there are not that many differences in, capability and talent. It's not even so much about hard work. It's just simply about sheer perseverance, about tenacity, about not giving up. And there will be 100 things that will tell you to give up. I can tell you in my own professional career, every single person in my life, except, and this is interesting, my mother-in-law, at some point in my life has told me, you should give up working, even if it is for a small, short period. Every kids, yes, kids are selfish. They will tell you, they want mama. Funnily enough, like I said, my mom-in-law was a working woman. She was a teacher, and she always told me, don't ever give up your job. So this element of just relentless, sheer pursuit of your goals and just kind of weathering those storms and moving ahead is something that I would place a lot of emphasis on. And as this quote says, ambition is the path to success. Persistence is the vehicle you arrive in. So part of the job is outlining the path. Part of the job is clearing the path. There'll be so many naysayers who are standing in the path. Please tell them politely to take a step aside. But in the end, it's your persistence that will drive your vehicle into that path. Ambition also needs guidance. And I think this is something both men and women need. This is a complicated one for women because there are the boys clubs, and there are now, of course, thankfully, one of the good things about working hybrid or working online is there are no smoke breaks, there are no corridor conversations, there are no water filter, little gossip sessions. But networking, again, I find that difficult word because it has so many connotations and not all of them are positive. It is actually connects back to that ambitious trope that we have. But if I just simply outline this whole point of ambition needs guidance, you could be the most hardworking, you could be the most persevering person, but on that path that I talked about, there will be milestones, there will be signposts, there will be coaches, and there will be cheerleaders who are required. Otherwise, you can get lost. And to actively seek out sponsors and mentors is something I would urge all of you. Again, it sounds like a somewhat selfish or self-serving thing. Some people may be lucky. I mean, I honestly, in my life, and if I go back to my personal anecdotes, I was lucky. I was in the right company and I had mentors who saw much more in me than I saw in myself, and they gave me opportunities, and they kept saying, but you can do it, just do it. And then I was, on that path. But I feel that to take a more active role in that is a very good thing. And there are differences between sponsors and mentors. Mentors are people that you were typically not your immediate boss or super boss, and somebody you can go to, somebody who knows your field of work. Maybe your organization is able to say, you know what, don't push that way. So a lot of informal things which nobody will say, if it is formal or if it is recorded, but they will, give you little hints and nudges and say, do this, don't do that, talk to this person. Sponsors are people who are actually responsible for your career growth and your professional journey. And actually, you need both. And one must think through, just like you write out your own personal vision statement, you know what you want to do, you know who you want to be. You must take some time out and just sit in a room for 2 hours and say, how do I see myself and how do I get there? And who are the people who will support me in this journey? There is, the other thing is, a lot of us feel this so-and-so, sponsor or mentor, he or she is so busy and they're so senior. And why the hell would they be interested in me? And maybe they will say no. None of that actually works. People, almost all people, unless like you're a psychopath, they feel so good about helping other people. It's the one thing that gives them a lot of joy, because presumably many of these sponsors and mentors are people who have reached some level. Maybe they have other higher levels to reach, but they get their joy and their adrenaline and their rush from helping. And as a woman, my doors are always women, for men and women. I would say particularly for women, because there are not a lot of women, senior women, that can be accessed. So if I could, I would read, I would put a plaque on my head saying, I am available. Anybody wants any guidance, I'm available. So don't second guess that they're not interested in helping you. Don't second guess anything. Okay, so what's the worst thing? You go out and ask 5 people for help. One person says no, for whatever reason, maybe they are having a bad day, whatever. 4 people will help you. That's way better than nobody helping you. And you're kind of hurtling around saying, how do I navigate this maze? Organizations are mazes. You need those lampposts, you need those lighthouses to help you guide yourself in your journey. This is what I was talking about. Tell all those people to get out of your way. Keep away from those who try to belittle your ambitions. Small people always do that. The really great make you believe that you too can become great. Never ever, I have selective amnesia. I have forgotten all the people who've told me you can't do it. I remember and cherish all the people who've told me, go ahead, girl, you can do it. So sometimes it is, something like that. It's as simple as you selectively work on people who have the faith in you. But of course, after that, you do have to do the work. You have to do all the hard work. You have to do the perseverance. No denying any of that. So that's really it from my side. This is really, the journey. How do you peel the onion off a word like ambition, which has some hard connotations? I gave you one, life hack of looking at it as vision. There is another word that is a little more palatable, and maybe that is also a good word for many of you as another tip, which is the word aspiration. I aspire to be XYZ. Yeah, sure. Aspiration has, for whatever reasons, positive, connotations, and maybe that is good, vision is good. And maybe, just maybe, in 10 or 15 years' time, uh, ambition and women, ambitious women, will be seen as a very, very positive stereotype, as something that men and women and children think that's like really, really, somewhere outside and out of this world, something wonderful. So this is my little piece on nurturing ambition. Nurture your ambition. Like I said, sometime somewhere in the middle, nobody else is interested in your career as much as you are. Nobody. So just take charge of that, nurture yourself, nurture your ambition, nurture your talents, nurture your capabilities, keep adding skills. Be very honest with yourself on what you can and cannot do. If something is a problem and it's not something that you can fix at the age of 30, 40, whatever, maybe it's not such a good idea to keep banging your head. Take another path and make sure that you are moving ahead in that. So that's it from my side. I'm just stopping the sharing and yeah.
Thanks a lot, Suparna, for addressing, a topic which is so considered almost a bad word. Being ambitious is considered bad almost to the point of being greedy. So it's really interesting, the facts that you shared or your thoughts and views that you shared. Now we're almost running out of time, but would you please share, stay on for another 2 minutes? I have one question for you, Suparna. Is at any time in your life, in your career, have you had two conflicting ambitions, and it was very, very difficult for you, and you had to choose one over the other?
Yeah, I will actually share both ways, and usually this conflict is between family and work, right? So there was a time in my life when my younger daughter was born. I went back to work, but I was very tired. I was exhausted, and I was not giving my best at work. I was feeling very, uh, very low, and one day I just said, I'm not doing justice to my work, and I'm not doing justice to my family. And I said, that's it. I take a break, and I took a break for 8 months, and it was after that break that I joined Titan. And the conflict was kind of like raging in my head, but the day I took the decision, it solved itself, right? Now, I had some anxiety about would I get a good job back? And this was 16, 17 years back. So, the evidence of women coming back on a good career track was lesser. But I was very convinced that I could do it and I would do it. It was just a matter of time. And I gave myself the time. And I'm so glad I did it because I was wrung out. I had nothing more to give to anybody. I needed to take care of myself, my body, my mind, everything. That's on one side. And the other side was when I got this opportunity to become the regional business head in Titan. And that was a very intensive, very travel heavy, very ops heavy job. When I got that job, my younger daughter was 6. And I was like, what does this mean because of the travel? Is this something that we can manage, as a family? How would the kids cope? What would it mean for me, for my learning and my professional growth? And it was, I discussed with everyone in the family, and it was like, yeah, go for it. We'll manage. And everyone managed, it was fine. I don't think my kids even recall what I was doing at that time. For them, mom has always been working, so they don't necessarily see the difference, but it made a big difference to my career. It did. Without that on ground, like there were 1,000 people under me at that time, and that very heavy ops background, I wouldn't have gotten future roles as easily. So it was something that I did, and yeah, and the conflict kind of goes away when you know why you're doing what you're doing.
Right. Really, hats off to you and women like you who somehow manage, such conflicting ambitions. And I'm a mother myself, so I know, how that feels. And thank you, Suparna, for taking time out and joining us. And we really do hope to, invite you for further sessions at, from the Monster team side as well as the Quess side. And hope to see you soon. Have a good evening.
Thank you so much. It was lovely and I really enjoyed it. Thank you all.
Thank you. And I request the audience to stay on for a few minutes, please. Hi, welcome back, everyone. Next up in this session, we have Sekhar Garisa, CEO of Monster, APAC, and EMI, have a conversation with Irina, Ghose, Executive Director of Microsoft Cloud Solution. Let me introduce Irina, Ghose to all of you. As the leader of Microsoft Cloud Solutions in India, Irina is responsible for empowering cloud adoption and digital transformation by engaging with customers and partners to envision and architect their digital growth strategy. Irina leads a team of cloud specialists and technical evangelists with diverse capabilities across Microsoft's 5 solution areas. And Irina has been a Microsoft veteran for nearly 2 decades, and she has held a variety of strategy and sales leadership roles across our enterprise and education segments. And in this capacity, Irina joins us today to have a conversation with our own CEO, Sekhar Garisa. Welcome, Sekhar and Irina.
Thank you, Vidya.
A very good evening to everybody. Pleasure to be here with you, Sekhar, and thank you so much to the Monster India team for inviting me. I was just listening to the previous conversation as well. It was very, very energizing. Thank you so much.
Hi, Irina. Good evening, and so good to see you again. A small disclosure before we start conversation to the audience that Irina and I were colleagues not too long ago, maybe a couple of years back. We were working together. So always a pleasure to speak to you, Irina. Thank you for taking time out.
It's a complete pleasure, and really happy to be here with you, Sekhar. And thanks a lot for inviting me for this event. It's a pleasure and honor to be with
Lovely.
with all of you.
Before we start, I also want to take a minute to thank Microsoft for being part of the event. Having been at Microsoft just a couple of years back, I do know that this is a cause that Microsoft completely embodies in letter and spirit. So for me, it was very important that someone like Microsoft comes in and is a partner in the event like this. So thanks to Microsoft team as well. And we've had a couple of sessions during the evening, Irina, and we spoke a lot about diversity and inclusion. And we also touched upon the point that, a lot of times we talk about D&I in the construct of hiring, but we often forget how important it is to create an environment for an inclusive workforce. And that more often than not is a bigger challenge to solve for than just to hire people from diverse backgrounds. And since you've been at Microsoft for a couple of decades now across roles, from a new joinee to an executive leadership role with an Indian organization now, how do you see, what do you think are the key factors that every organization has to keep in mind to create an atmosphere and enable this kind of inclusive workforce? What are the best practices that you've seen in your own long career?
Sure. So when I say this, I also want to put in context as to, say, Microsoft's journey itself. 2 decades earlier when I joined, it was a company which was into a certain set of products, essentially. And we were known for what we did in, say, Office and Windows. Yep. Post a certain period of time, we moved across to the server scenarios, then moving across to solutions. And then we moved across to cloud. So when we made this journey, what was happening is that we had to change the culture of the entire organization to learn things differently, to learn things new. And in my mind, the entire journey of diversity and inclusion in many, many facets came very, very true in this itself. Say, for example, diversity panning across to having people who are early in career, internal versus external talent. And how do we kind of have all these things made real homogeneously across the entire organization? Because that's the critical part. It's not just how you do it at a point of time, but how do you do it for everybody?
Yep.
So frankly, I just feel that the culture that we have is towards putting a few pillars. So one, we ensure that we keep on transforming the culture with the need of the time. The second, we also want to ensure that we are empowering our own people to lift that culture, which is by having, say, equitable opportunities and ensuring that we create a very inclusive way that every voice is heard. The third, we also try to ensure that when we talk about a diverse culture, it's essentially expanding our reach to various sections of population which are diverse in nature. And finally, it's also towards delighting our own customer with this entire diverse led culture. And we break this again in these 4 pillars to say how do senior leaders embody this? How do people managers live through this? And how do people make itself very real? So for example, the senior leaders, they should model this in their day-to-day way of working. The managers should coach their teams and create that inclusive culture. And the people who are the employees, they should literally say do things which they want by being a part of these employee resource groups, bringing in their own referrals to be to actually expand the footprint of diversity. And finally, giving a lot of inputs to say even the product groups and various others as to what makes sense for an inclusive technology-led way itself. So I would say it's an end-to-end way of keeping this culture, the diversity element, and building up for the future, Sekhar.
Yeah, and as a lead question to Irina, it would be interesting to know in your long journey, how you've seen this evolve over a period of time. I'm sure the situation was very different, like you said, 20 years back, not just from what Microsoft used to sell, but I'm sure even in terms of the internal processes and the maturity around bringing in an inclusive workforce, right? So how did you see this evolve over a period of time, and where you are currently at Microsoft? And I know there's a lot of research and attention that Microsoft pays to it. So it would be good for the audience to take out maybe 2 or 3 best practices that Microsoft uses that all of us can adopt in our own workplaces.
Sure. So I think a few things that we do very, very intentionally is that for everybody, the managers and upwards for every leader, D&I is a part of what we call our core priority. So when we actually see as to how the leader is showing up, how the manager is showing up, it's also towards saying that, what did I do as being a D&I proponent? And a D&I proponent is not just being a great culture talent or a diverse talent for my own team, but how did I contribute to the entire company's overall way of taking it across? Similarly, for, say, an employee, how do they take the spirit through, say, allyship? Or how did they kind of bring across a much larger diverse culture here? So I would say that the first thing is towards really making it a part of everybody's priority and intentionally seeing that are we being honest and are we being intrinsically saying at every point of time that this is what we'll be going in for the top. The second thing we also do is that we manage our progress on this periodically over a period of time, so that it isn't something that it's a seasonal need, right? It has to increasingly become a part of the core way that we are bringing this front, right, and center for everybody who's seeing it, right? So we have various ways in which the statistics, the various ways in which we kind of see as to how are we kind of doing it, doing the overall way of increasing diverse representation at the senior leadership level, at a managerial level, at the entry level. A key part of this is also the fact about retention versus, if I may, the entry or the admission, right? At times, hiring is not such a difficult thing at the entry level. However, retention is such a critical thing because at various points of time, people in the mid-manager fall off the work stream because of various reasons. If the career is not progressing in the right direction, or say family constraints, and that became so pronounced during the pandemic era, not getting the right opportunity. So I think a very, very core intentional thing is that how are we ensuring that we show the right career path, mentoring people, and ensuring that we really keep on growing the talent. Towards this, we also have a program such as a Springboard, wherein for women who've had to fall out of the work stream, we give them internship opportunities after the break and offer them internship first, and then also full-time opportunities to join at the end if they are successful. So I would say that these are some of the things, and we also partner very closely with our learning teams to ensure that D&I linked learning path is refreshed and followed every year, and people like really know that why is it important, and it's not just a learning which is led across by a classroom. It's experiential to say that how the entire organization, society, business, and everything kind of goes through a change overall.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that stands out for me from my experience at Microsoft is just the sheer number of times we talk about it, because we all realize oftentimes that everybody has the right intentions, most of us have, but at times our own understanding of this concept in a very nuanced way is a constraint. So I do remember the number of hours that we used to spend even at a leadership level, just in terms of updating ourselves on what is the best that we can do to foster this kind of environment. So that surely stands out from my own days at Microsoft. So I think that's something that Microsoft does really well and something that all of us can emulate.
Absolutely.
It lacks a bit, Irina, and I'm going to talk about something that I know you are very passionate about, and Microsoft is one of the loudest voice around there in terms of AI and responsible AI, and how we're using the power of artificial intelligence to drive the concept around D&I. How do organizations build it into their products, into their processes, into their culture? How is AI helping inculcate this aspect into organizations? And I'm sure I would love for you to also touch upon, how is AI helping people with disabilities in terms of, the most advanced product development capabilities that Microsoft is making available to developers. So it would be good to hear your take on that.
Absolutely. Let me actually break this into a few parts. Firstly, when we think about AI, we also have to remember that AI is all dependent on the base level data which goes in, right? So at this point of time, AI is really helping solve a lot of business problems, various kinds of challenges or opportunities, as you may, towards addressing things in a very, very agile and efficient, non-biased manner. But having said that, there are areas where AI can also throw up results which you will question. And I'll give you a very simple example, which might be relevant for you all. So there was one of our ISV partners with whom we had developed a solution, which was towards finding a right fitment for a job or a fitment for a person for different jobs. Now, there was a lot of tests which had been done to see that basis the historical data, what is the kind of fitment which can be there, or basis the person's profile, what could be the various ways this person can be suited across to job A, B, C, D, E. When this was actually put into play, the results were not accurate because there was a familiarity bias in the data itself, and the women population were hardly present. So it throwed up an error of an 80-20. So we had to supervise the data to ensure that you're feeding the right inputs to correct them out. So there could be such biases. The other bias that I think we are all aware of is on financial inclusion, wherein women entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs who are coming across from rural or other backgrounds, men or women, they kind of tend to be on the fringes because the data is not sufficient or adequate, right? So those are things which can happen and we need to be very mindful of. But now where does AI kind of really play the other way around? Technology and assistive technology for different kinds of people with special needs or needing things which is panning across so many kind of things. There are now things which are built across into our base operating system, into the entire portfolio of our products. So people who are having any kind of a need for, say, vision, for, say, typing things, ensuring that things are coming across in a particular way. Now with the overall advancements, we are able to do that very, very clearly. And even taking this across to a lot of our hardware that is kind of there for our consumers, we are building those things very, very intentionally in, so that different parts of the population who are, say, into gaming, who are, say, into doing various kinds of routine things, and even people who are, say, wanting to follow art, but they might have had an issue because of a physical disability, unable to do that. So things get coined across for them. So irrespective of whether you have any kind of a thing towards vision, towards sight, towards sound or anything, I would say that AI is becoming a leveler in many ways and opportunities getting opened.
That's so fantastic to hear. I think one of the best definitions of responsible AI would be if it were to eliminate biases like this and be more inclusive to anyone who might have a handicap on any one ability. So I think that's a fantastic direction that AI is pushing all of us towards. And I think even in the hiring process, what we are seeing is more and more companies are asking us to anonymize the profiles, so that when recruiters look at profiles and shortlist, their inherent biases don't come into play. So going forward, we do feel like almost every customer would just ask for the profile and not want to know the background of the person, which could open them to some biases. So we do see that coming in even in our area of work. And I think as you learn, and as you rightly pointed out, it is not always positive. You have to watch out for stuff that could go wrong, as well as AI starts learning from past data and starts replicating it, may not be the right thing to do. So I think that's brilliant, the way we're not just building these technologies, but watching out for where technology could actually accentuate the bias that's already there in terms of data. Just switching lanes to your own personal journey a bit, Irina. And I've always, when I was at Microsoft, I always obviously have seen you in a leadership position. And when I looked at the leadership group around us, you could almost always feel like it's very evenly represented. But I'm sure it was not the case all through over your 20 years at Microsoft. And as you went through this journey, I'm sure you would have had to fight some biases. You would have to kind of break some stereotypes, break a lot of glass ceilings over and over again. So would love to hear, how has it been for you in terms of your journey towards a leadership role, and what helped you in terms of personal and professional support groups, communities? How did that play out for you, and what is it that folks can learn from your own journey?
Sure. So I can possibly put it across in a few phases. When I joined Microsoft, the early part of the career, the thing which really worked for me is to take the largest ecosystem of my virtual team and getting them onboarded into where I am, what I want to do, and how I can lean on them. And more importantly, being vulnerable and asking for help and letting them lean in for me as well. Actually, in the initial part of my years at Microsoft, I had both my children after I entered Microsoft. And of course, I had to take a few breaks. But ensuring that my virtual team, my team, was really kind of standing in for me and ensuring that nothing went disrupted. Because you always have a guilt. Am I doing enough? And when I'm kind of not there, what am I missing out on? Is that something important? So having that piece that you're kind of really putting in your best. So I would say that the power of building that community or that network to be the force multiplier for you is a big, big thing, right? That's the first one. The second one I would say is that a lot of times biases come across when you want a particular role and people kind of really think, are you ready for it? So it's a proverbial question which comes across, maybe not now, maybe after some time when you prove yourself. So I think the one of the learnings that I had there was being very open to taking feedback and working on the feedback and going back and saying, this is the feedback, this is how I have developed myself, and then kind of asking for the opportunity again. So I would say that being vocal about what you want, but not getting dispirited if you do not get it. So ensure that one person knows that why he or she did not get it, and then working your path towards making it happen. And the third thing I would just say on a skill set part that I really learned, and which is very, very relevant in today's time, I changed my overall orientation from being in front of the customer as a account manager, business leader, to kind of taking across a technology led overall business. And I had to unlearn and learn a lot of things. So I would say that in today's age, you really have to keep an eye about what are the new things which are happening externally and where do you put your eye on. That's so important. So I always think of myself as a person with that map and the compass and kind of figuring out the route and keeping an end goal in mind, but taking the route which is kind of flexible and changing yourself going there. So these are the three broad things that I've done. But some of the overall learnings I would just say that which came to me is that it's also at times important to take certain non-conventional routes. The learnings are immense because you get an open plate and an open canvas in which you can draw anything that you really want across to. So having that flexibility and not always being hard-coded on what you want to do, that's important. The second I would say is that not being very focused on the title of the role, but the canvas of the role. You make what the role has to deliver. So as long as you're kind of not worried about where you're boxed, but what you can do as a part of this, because that's what the world sees you as at any point of time.
Mm-hmm.
And the third part is, I think a lot of us tend to think what we are good at and hence choose our options. It's also important to know the options and plunge yourself and take a bet and see that maybe it will work out for you in the longer run. Not negate any option, because I've got my mind in terms of thinking that I am good at this, right? So maybe I don't know what I'm good at. So I don't know what I don't know, right? So those are some of the things that I kind of learned. And those are the things that which actually I got a lot of support from my peers, managers, mentors, everybody who kind of egged and goaded and coached me on the way too.
I think that's a very important piece of advice, especially in times like this where businesses are changing, roles are changing, the expectations and the dynamics of every role keeps changing. To be not fixated in what you want to do, but take that chance and go out and try out new roles, and eventually in the long run, that's what makes you a well-rounded leader. I think that's a very good advice. And Irina, I also know that you've got a very vibrant life outside of work, and I always wondered how you managed to do it. I've known you as someone who's super disciplined at work, and and kind of someone who made us look bad in the leadership group. You would be the first one to finish all training certifications, before anyone else. But I also know that you've been involved very actively in a few initiatives outside of work. Either through Sounder Connect or through My Little Bit. And my own personal experience about volunteering is it's part of it is about contributing, but a lot of it is also about what you learn and how you grow as a person yourself as you go through a volunteering experience. So two questions. One, would love for you to speak about the work that you do outside of work, since both of those are very closely related to the cause that we're talking about today. And also the second part of the question is, how do you manage to do all of this? And I also know you are a fitness freak, and I see that you keep running a half marathon for fun every week. So how do you manage your day, and how do you manage to put all of these priorities without any of the walls falling by?
Okay. I think the last part about the passion, I guess I run, you play, Sekhar. I know that you are a very ardent person on your playing over the weekends as well. I think whatever a person is passionate about, they find their zone in that. Coming to the other question about what I do as a part of Sonder Connect and My Little Bit. So two diverse things actually. And My Little Bit is a journey that I started more than 10 years back. And that was something in which I was very passionate about doing something for the society, for girls in particular, and underprivileged girls. So I started this with a computer lab, say for girls who were in the government schools, and put up the entire digital literacy program, starting to teaching them Word, Excel, PowerPoint, etc. And then I started this in one school. And then I realized that over a period of time, the girls were dropping out of maths and science because those were becoming very difficult. So we started special classes for them. We started telling them who the role models could be and why they should be yearning for that. Then we realized that being in that socioeconomic strata, they were not getting the right support for higher education. So we started doing charity runs for getting them scholarships for higher education. And after all this, we suddenly realized that they were not able to get into jobs. So they were, literally getting married and falling off the job streams, a lot of them. So we started putting a skilling program, which we ran across with Team Lees, to ensure that we are skilling them as a part of their overall journey, and we ensure that they are kind of getting placement for jobs. And I think the way I have kind of seen this overall thing grow is that through the digital literacy program, we've now put things across in 5 schools. We've now trained the children for special classes across 6 years, and it's always so heartening when you see 3 girls emerging as toppers. We've kind of, in the pandemic also, we've managed to give scholarships for girls. In the last year, we managed to place 4 girls also out there. So these things kind of went across a long way. And I guess the overall thing that I see is that everybody wants to do something. And at times you just have to figure out as to who are the people around you, whose life you can start with little differences. And my own thing was that go deep, make a difference for smaller set of people, and then scale it out. So now, of course, the operations have scaled, but this is how it started with doing things for a smaller set of people. And that's why we call it My Little Bit. We just tell people to join this entire motion, do their little bits for whatever number of people, whatever cause they're interested in, for girls in particular. Now, on the Sonder Connect part, actually, it was something that I really wanted to learn as well, to the point you made, Sekhar. And I wanted to be a part of the startup ecosystem. So while I was driving the enterprise business in Microsoft, I really started going across with the Microsoft for startups at that point of time, and to understand how the business was going on. And I offered help towards how we can kind of help towards GTM for those organizations. That was really a learning moment. And then, along with a few friends who had founded Sonder Connect, I became a trustee there. And Sonder Connect has been a motion for female entrepreneurs. Like everybody here might be knowing, the access to venture funds, or the number of women entrepreneurs and their ability to break that ceiling to be the unicorn is fraught with challenges. So we started this in 2016, and till date, we've actually mentored 6 batches and about 94 founders in areas ranging from space tech to sustainability and many more. And we mentor them on various things: raising funds, digital marketing, legal aspects, scale, networking, etc. And I think the pleasure comes across because when you see them going across and scaling things, it's really a very, very, very satisfying moment for us. So those are the things that I kind of keep doing.
Lovely, so wonderful to hear, and I do have to. I'm pretty inspired with the work that you're doing with My Little Bit, and do let us know, both from a Monster perspective, Quess Group perspective. Would love to be part of it and see how we can help you scale this program. I'm sure the world needs a lot more of such activities. I know we're running out of time, Irina. Just one last question before I let you go. Again, drawing from the fact that you've had such a long and illustrious career, if you were to go back in time and advise maybe a 25-year-old Irina now getting into the workforce, what would be your advice to her, and how would you advise her to create the right kind of ecosystem and support groups around them? How do you advise her to plan their career and manage multiple priorities that they will have to manage over a period of time? So what would be your piece of advice to a 25-year-old Irina now?
I would say, first of all, don't take yourself too seriously and have fun in the initial part of your career. And that's the time when you're a sponge, you can soak in so much. That also gives you the ability to be bold and take risks because you're really not worried about failures. So if you take risks, if you're being bold, whatever happens, it's a learning for you. You take that across and you go in that journey. So that is, I would say, something that I would have told myself. The second part is getting the entire family ecosystem, your spouse, your in-laws, your parents, everybody to be a part of your career journey. And I'm saying this from a perspective of being a woman, because everybody has a way to pitch in to make you successful. And I remember the way my transition was happening through various parts of my life. And there are times when I'll be running on a high lane. There are times when I'll be running on a medium lane or a slow lane. And that needs to be done with a cognizance of what, say, the company wants, as well as how I can say the entire thing along with the support of my family. The last part I would just say is that in today's world, especially for people who are early in career, is thinking about the brand that they are creating for themselves. A lot of times we do it, but it is not known to others. And in this era of the digital/social economy, frankly, the social media is a leveler. It doesn't matter whether you're an introvert or an extrovert. It doesn't matter whether you are kind of having inhibitions, talking on stage, etc. But one skill I really feel, which I learned very late, honestly. And for me, that was like, oh my God, I have to get into this. So many people watching, etc. Those were initial fears. And I think that nobody is kind of wanting to pinpoint things across. People shouldn't take it seriously, but use this tool to really amplify themselves and kind of talk about who they are as a brand. And a lot of times people know people because of how they see them through their own search or whatever. So I would say that a little bit of a time to invest in that would also be nice.
Lovely. Very insightful and practical as always, Irina. And so lovely to have you here. Thank you for sharing your experience. And I'm sure everyone watching this session would have gone back with a lot of inspiration, but equally importantly, with a lot of hacks that they can start using in their own career. Thank you so much. Thank you for supporting the event. Thank you for being an inspiration to many young colleagues, not just in Microsoft, but overall. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sekhar. It was a pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you, Irina.
Thank you, Sekhar and Irina, for a wonderful conversation and a truly heartfelt conversation at that. And with that, we have come to the end of today's session. And we do have many more such sessions lined up for tomorrow. And we'd like all of you to join us. And like we said at the beginning, we want all of you to be inspired, compete healthily, and of course, go get your dream jobs. And on that note, we'll call it a day. See you all tomorrow. And thank you for joining us. Bye.